It's time for Supply Chain Now Radio, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Supply Chain Now Radio spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Scott Luton here with you live on Supply Chain Now. Welcome back to the show. What a week we're having. We're not broadcasting live from Atlanta, Georgia as usual. We're here in beautiful Scottsdale, Arizona, as we're covering and continuing our coverage of the DMSCA conference. Diverse Manufacturing Supply Chain Alliance has had a great annual conference out here all about supplier development and supplier diversity, and we are learning a ton and really learning from a lot of the thought leaders that are here as well. So before we get started, quick programming note, you can find our podcast wherever you get your podcast from, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, wherever. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. I want to welcome in my special, esteemed, fearless co-host here, Paul Noble, founder and CEO of Verison. Paul, how you doing?
I'm well. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to be back. A beautiful sunrise here in the desert this morning.
It was gorgeous. So it's my first, not your first time, my first time to Arizona. Yeah. And it's a shame we're not going to be able to spend as much time as we should exploring and seeing this geography and just the culture that's out here. But
gives us a reason to come back.
Yes, we will definitely be coming back soon. And really one other programming note, we appreciate Verison's sponsorship of our coverage here at DMSCA. I love that you've been sitting in for Greg White, making him jealous back in Atlanta. But we've really enjoyed the thought leadership here. It covered a wide range of topics as usual. And quick note about Verison, AI-driven data harmonization globally, right? That's what we're after at the Verison team.
Yeah, focused on materials and supply chain.
Materials and supply chain. You can learn more at verison.com. Okay, so Paul, before we interview and kick off the interview with our special guest for this session, what's one observation from the last day and a half that you have really found compelling about the event here?
Yeah, I think it's been great. The intimacy of the event really, I think, brings together strong partnerships. And those partnerships and relationships within DMSCA really highlight the power of the group. And I think being in technology, I think that there's a unique opportunity to enhance those great partnerships and not overlook those, the human element of these partnerships and the role that suppliers, important role suppliers play.
The human element.
Yeah.
Sounds like a Bruce Springsteen album. I love it.
Right. Dropping in Q2 of 2020.
But that has been a big common theme of our conversations here today, and I imagine we'll touch on that as we interview our featured guests here for this segment, Marie O'Malley, Senior Director, Supplier Outreach with Medtronic, big brand. Marie, how you doing?
Good morning. How are you?
Great to have you. We're
you.
Starting early here on, I guess, technically day 2.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it. As busy as everyone is at these intimate events where there's constant keynotes and the sidebar conversations that we've all spoken a lot about. Appreciate your time here this morning. So, Marie, before we kind of dive in and talk shop and get your thoughts on a variety of things, we want to get to know you better first.
Sure.
So give us a skinny, tell us about where you're from, and give us a few anecdotes on your upbringing.
Sure. So I grew up in upstate New York, but I've been in Boston my whole professional career.
Okay.
So I live in North Shore of Boston with my husband and a dog, and we have a 21-year-old daughter who's in college in Worcester Polytech studying engineering.
Engineering. What specialty?
Biomedical engineering.
Wow.
So getting into the med device field.
Yeah, right.
No influence.
Chip off the old block. That's great.
Well, now, prior to you kicking off your professional career, how did you, from an education standpoint, where did you choose to go?
So I got my undergrad at Binghamton University, State University of New York, in accounting. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my career early on, so my father said, either be an engineer or an accountant. You can always get a job.
Love that.
So I did start my professional career in accounting and finance. I got a master's degree in taxation and MBA in Boston, so I moved up there. But my career has taken a lot of different paths, so it was actually good advice. I had a good foundation. Well, didn't really love the accounting and finance side of things, but I did become a certified accountant, and I think that created some attention in my company because I did quite well on the certification exam. I actually passed it and got second highest score in the world. And
nice.
Wow.
My boss, who had taken it 3 times, and then insisted everyone else get it, was kind of like, whoa, wait a second.
Yeah.
But that got the attention of the sales team. So they invited me to work for them, doing commissions and pricing and negotiating deals with hospitals. I've been in the med device for 25 years.
Yeah.
And then after that, we've had a ton of acquisitions at Medtronic. So I got an opportunity to move into global supply chain and do planning and work import-export logistics. And, that was interesting for me. I mean, there's just so much going on in supply chain, as I'm sure you guys know.
Yeah.
And early in, 20 years ago, it wasn't the profession it is today.
That's right.
But it's really elevated. And then I moved into sourcing, so I led a global team buying materials for our cardiac vascular group. So anything from components of papers and metals to pig hearts and logistics.
Everything in between.
Everything in between.
How do you source a pig heart?
You get them from the people you buy bacon and sausage. So Oscar Mayer, Jimmy Dean. It's a byproduct, but it's used in heart valves.
I love that. I love
That's cool.
Being able to use the entire animal, especially for probably some life-saving endeavors.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I can't tell you that we've ever had a podcast interview that we talked about pig heart sourcing, but it makes, for those that I'm not sure how many.
The beautiful honey hole of supply chain.
That's right. But Paul, weigh in on what Marie just shared. 2 things really stuck out, and as she kind of walked us through at a high level of her journey, the ever-evolving landscape of what is considered supply chain now, end-to-end supply chain now, which I've been told end-to-end is dead. It's all about circular. Yeah. And I'm wrapping my head around that still. But also, secondly, all the diverse roles she had. I mean, she's like a 5-tool player these days.
Yeah, I think it shows, the many aspects that you have to have on the team and have in the tool belt to manage supply chain effectively. And I think it's interesting, too. We had Rick on yesterday from Turtle & Hughes. He started in accounting and found his way to supply chain.
That's right.
There you go.
And
it's like the power of supply chain finance these days. It really is.
It's all about, obviously driving working capital optimization, and there's so much that goes into it. So I think it's great.
We had a listener shoot me a note last night. He is in school in Virginia, and he's studying engineering, economics, and supply chain. And he talk about a deadly weapon getting out of school. But back to Marie. So Marie, what was the you've really run the gamut in a variety of different roles. When did you become the senior director of supplier outreach at Medtronic?
I just moved to that position 3 years ago. Okay. So we have 4 very large business groups of Medtronic, so with different disease states. So cardiac vascular group, restorative therapies group, diabetes, and then a minimally invasive therapies group. So each group has their own sourcing team, and we have a chief procurement officer that reports into our corporate headquarters, up to the CEO level, and to pull together and kind of, where it makes sense, leverage our spend and have common processes. So he had hired me a couple years ago to really lead at an enterprise-wide level our supplier diversity and responsible sourcing. And it's an area that I've always been passionate about. I got my certified professional supplier diversity credential a couple years ago. I was one of the early adopters to get that credential. So it's something I've always felt strongly about. So it was a good role for me, and having been in the business unit for a number of years, gives me that lens of how to effectively engage with the business units, knowing they're busy too, but how do you add value to help them do their jobs easier and then meet our corporate goals of really making sure we're working with the right supply-based partners.
So you mentioned the 4 different business units of Medtronic. What else, if someone that was completely, again, the 4 people that may not have heard of Medtronic globally, what one product or service that they would recognize that Medtronic serves to the market?
Yeah, we're the world's largest medical device company, so we are treating 2 patients every second.
2 patients every second.
2 patients every second. But we started with a pacemaker. So our founder, Earl Bakken, invented the first pacemaker in his garage over 60 years ago.
Wow.
But now we have a broad portfolio of products, so it includes anything to treat cardiovascular disease like stents and balloons, or if you're having open heart, it's all the devices for that. We do products for our spine if you have an accident or need those neurostimulators, diabetes pumps, so continuous glucose monitoring pumps. It's pretty prevalent.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
My mom is a certified diabetes educator,
There you
and
go.
over the last 20 plus years, and I've learned a ton more about diabetes, which, to your point about how prevalent it is, and how really dangerous it can be if you don't manage it.
Yeah.
That was a blind spot for me until she educated me and certified me. All right. So, Paul, hearing all of that, are you curious about where Marie spends most of her time in her current role?
Yeah, we'd love to hear a little bit about, a day in the life, right? So, how do you attack? I think it's awesome and a difficult challenge to break down the silos of an organization. As large as Medtronic. So how do you work across those different variables of the business units and kind of attack or approach your role?
Yeah, I would say it's interesting, the question, day in the life, because I think anyone in supply chain, day in the life is so different. And that's what I think makes the field so interesting. A lot of times you have a plan of what you're going to do today, and then it's the crisis of the day. But, in this role, it gives me an opportunity to be a little bit more strategic in what we're doing and trying to advance our supplier diversity programs or responsible sourcing, which is such a huge area of focus, but really having a good network across the businesses, which, having been with the company for so long, I have those relationships, so that's helpful. But really trying to drive strategy and then getting people to really understand the importance of it. So it's a lot of that communication and education so that people understand why supplier diversity, what's the business case. I mean, we talked a lot about it at this conference the last day and a half, but just putting together some of those programs and then really pulling together resources and connections from each of the business units to help champion it and drive good progress. So we've done a good job at Medtronic. We need to do better. But it's exciting. I think it's such an emerging area of focus. And, even at our executive level, people are really talking more about what's happening in supply chain and our supply base. So it's getting a lot more visibility. It can really, in the past, I think, dating back early into my career, it was very tactical. Place orders with suppliers, keep the factories running,
get the best price, right?
Yeah. But now you can have such an impact to the bottom line of the company, like you said, working capital and things like that. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah, it's really become a science of sorts, and I think as you explained it, it's really important to attack it in that way because it becomes a significant competitive advantage.
Yeah, I'd say it's a science, but most of the days it's an art too.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
So, Marie, and if you can't share it, perfectly fine. We'll move right along. You're talking about how you've done it. The organization's done a great job at that supplier diversity, but there's more work to do, and many organizations, can probably relate to that. Is there one metric that is the North Star as you look at supplier diversity and supplier development that you look at more often than others?
I would say, we're a government contractor and we report it to our shareholders too, but we're trying to grow our diverse spend at least 5% year over year in all the major categories. So we do track that. The other thing that we track is just our inclusion. So making sure that we consider a diverse supplier in new opportunities. And then we do quite a bit of outreach. Like we're trying to help develop and mentor some of those diverse suppliers that have done a nice job in other industries maybe and want to get into medical device, which is a little bit different, but how to be successful in those areas. So, those are things we report on pretty regularly. As a publicly traded company, we report into Dow Jones as part of the sustainability index. I mean, supplier diversity is a key element of a lot of those key metrics that are reported externally. So,
Good point. Okay. So now I want to take the conversation broader, and I want to get you to weigh in on, in this ever I like how you put it a minute ago. Each day you've got a plan, and then you have what becomes, right? The problems that always arise that supply chain folks are good at putting out all these fires. So in this ever-changing landscape that is global supply chain management, what's one or two trends or topics or issues that you may be tracking more than others right now?
I guess the topic of the day for us is the coronavirus.
Sure.
I mean, it's just, and we're a medical device company, so we've been partnering with the Chinese government where it started and providing some of the equipment that patients are needing, and we've actually tried to help get some, masks and things like that to help our own employees that are in China. So that is a hot topic of the day. But outside of that, I would say, the trend is really how do we continue to advance healthcare and continue to drive innovation. And we do look to our suppliers to help with that. We're really good on the technology side for the devices, but we look at suppliers of how they can bring innovation for us so we can, treat more patients. We're expanding globally. So, a lot more patients are getting access to healthcare, and we need to figure out how to do that in an effective, cost-effective way. So, that puts continuous cost pressures on us. So that, that's a huge trend and a huge pressure. And we're trying to drive efficiencies and costs in our own operations, but we need to do that in our supply base too.
Sure.
Yeah. Talk about unplanned demand, right? And having to respond quickly, and what a key partners and suppliers can do to rally together in a crisis like we're seeing.
Great point. And what a great, what an interesting time to see supply chain it kind of show its leadership muscle. I mean, that's the opportunity, and that's the responsibility really of global supply chain leadership. So, I really, we, as you might imagine, Marie, we've talked a lot about coronavirus here throughout the different shows from a variety of different points of view. And this show will publish probably in a couple weeks from the time we have this conversation. What my hope is, kind of outside of the containment of the virus itself, because I think we're getting a lot of mixed signals, there. Yeah. But looking at the supply chain from a sheer supply chain disruption, right? Something that's a little bit more objective. It seems like the worst disruption is still yet to come for many supply chains. Is that a fair estimate? Is that what y'all see?
Well, I mean, we're assessing it. We actually have daily meetings on it. We do have a supply chain base in China, but we have done a good job of trying to look at business continuity because we've weathered a lot of issues with hurricanes in Puerto Rico, which is a big operation base for us, or fires in California where we have a big operation. So we've done a lot better job of business continuity and looking at alternative sources. So I don't know if I would say for us the worst is to come. I think we're trying to navigate that right now and understand it, and we'll see. But we're not projecting that
that's good.
It's going to be
major
a big issue.
Disruption. No, the preparation is key, and for you all, in the medical business and dealing with something of that nature, it's interesting. You can't just pull out of China and not address the situation like maybe you could if you're manufacturing just hard goods or something like that there.
No, we take that very seriously. I mean, our mission is, all about the patients and, alleviating pain, extending life, and restoring health. And
two patients a second.
And so we're a market leader. So we have an obligation to make sure we can continue to supply and serve our patients. So we take that very seriously.
Great point.
Absolutely.
Well, certainly, as always, thoughts and prayers are with the families that have been impacted globally. We hope to get more good news on the containment of the virus itself. We'll see how that goes in the weeks to come. Okay, so beyond coronavirus, which is on the tips of every supply chain tongue these days. Yep. What else have you been tracking when it comes to the global supply chain arena?
I would just say the expansion of healthcare to other markets. So we're looking at how we get more efficient. We've had tremendous acquisitions over the years, so we're trying to look at where we should be operating, where we should be not building products, and looking at outside suppliers of who can do it better. So to make ourselves more efficient, and so we can really focus on bringing new innovations versus being a manufacturer.
Right. No, that's a great point. Predictability is kind of the holy grail, right? And never can be fully predictable, but being able to do that so you can concentrate on your mission as a company and not be handcuffed by the back page and some of those processes, I think is really a good point and good approach.
Yeah, great point. Let's talk about healthcare access. That's a beautiful thing, right? Especially as we see certain areas that businesses moving into, and beyond economic opportunity, it's offering healthcare access, and it's neat to hear a global healthcare or a medical product leader that weighs that and is keeping a finger on the pulse of that. How involved do y'all get into forward staging things and the whole go-to market aspect of healthcare proliferation?
I would say it's pretty key to our business. So, we've been, market leaders in U.S., Europe, and Japan, and some of the more developed countries, but we're seeing, tremendous increase in population. China is a good example. Right. I mean, that will be our biggest market. So we're really paying attention to it. I was actually in China in early January with the entire sourcing leadership team looking at, our operations over there, trying to understand the economy a little bit better and some of the key suppliers that we have in that region. So, that's just one example, but that will be our biggest market.
Right.
Yeah.
So you got to pay attention to it and figure out how you serve that market in an effective way.
Love it. And do you travel a lot in your role?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
So obviously the trip to China in early January, what else has been a really travel destination that's kind of lingered, kind of a neat experience in the last year or so?
I was in Singapore. I think that's a really interesting, advanced country. I really enjoyed that. I like travel in general. I just love meeting different people, different countries. I've traveled quite a bit to some of our contract manufacturers in Dominican and Costa Rica, and just the care that they have in, making devices. And I actually love it here. Just wish we had some time to enjoy this beautiful scenery.
Speaking of Singapore, I read an article in the last couple of weeks, the notion of smart cities, right?
Yep.
Well, the article was making the case that Singapore was the smartest country.
I believe that.
And I've never been, so you could see technology everywhere, I guess.
Yeah. It's just really interesting, and everything is just kind of Disney World exploded. I mean, everything is just so beautiful, so clean, and I liked it. But I'm actually heading to Portugal on Sunday, so I'm looking forward to that.
Ever been?
I've never been, so it's kind of a whirlwind 3 days of. It's not as glamorous as it sounds when you get on a plane, hit the ground, and then you're visiting 4 suppliers a day. But,
exactly.
While staying 100% caught up on email, which I admire.
There you go,
Marie.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's as we start to wind down the interview, really would love for you to weigh in on DMSCA and what brings you here, what value that your team sees in this conference, this organization.
Yeah, we've been a member of DMSCA for a number of years. It's their 10th year anniversary, but I think it's really brings together thought leaders from different companies. We see a lot of our industry peer groups here, and just to see what they're doing for supplier diversity, and I just think the conversations are really rich here with the, level of people that come together to spend, 2 days or 3 days focused on supplier diversity and what they're doing. So it's been a tremendous learning for me. So I've gotten a lot out of that. And some of the connections have been great, and meeting some suppliers and young professionals too.
So the team from Morgan State University, I think they have impressed everybody here. Speak to I meant to capture some of that pre-show conversation you and Paul were having.
Yeah.
Speak to the impact of having these bright kids here.
Yeah, I have a 21-year-old daughter who's a biomedical engineering student. So, when they had one of the panel discussions yesterday, and one of the young ladies was brave enough to raise her hand and just to ask a question. That was a pretty thoughtful question, but, just the fact that she stood up and had the courage to ask a question, and then it just kind of took off. Everyone was, kind of a bidding war to give those young professionals job opportunities and internships.
Yeah.
So, it just, good for them to, speak up and be present, and, everyone's looking for bright young talent. So what a tremendous opportunity for them.
You're absolutely right. And we've had sidebars with them. In fact, we're going to be interviewing 3 of their students here today at later on. And how engaged and how quickly they, from my conversations, they've been able to absorb the presentations and then offer feedback, very bright and thoughtful feedback. I'm impressed, and then I hope they leave here with. I think we were talking earlier with 7 job offers each. I mean,
I think so.
That's the impact,
if not more.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they think they've impressed everyone.
So you're saying the over and under is up?
I wish I knew about supply chain when I was in college.
All right. So finally, let's talk about how folks can learn more about Medtronic. I'm sure you all are hiring. That's usually one of the reasons why folks visit a lot of our guests. And then secondly, Marie, how can folks connect with you?
Yeah, so we are always hiring. We're a global company, so we have operations all over the globe. Nice presence here in the United States. So Minneapolis is our operational headquarters, but opportunities all over. So you can go on medtronic.com, and there is postings there. So that's a good way, and certainly network with Medtronic colleagues. I can be found on LinkedIn, so that's a good way to connect with me.
Perfect. Marie O'Malley, Senior Director, Supplier Outreach with Medtronic. Really appreciate your time and appreciate what y'all do. I'll tell you, just speaking for me, and I'm probably speaking for some members of our audience, the medical products industry is not one that I know deeply, and to hear the impact you're making globally, it's fascinating. Yeah. Especially the history and I never had tied pacemaker Medtronic. Shame on me. But two patients a second, that is impressive. So Marie, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. It's been fun.
All right, so Paul, what a great way to start day 2.
Yeah, cranking away.
Yeah, that's right. So to our audience, hopefully you've enjoyed this conversation with Marie as much as we have. 2 quick points as we wrap up here. First off, stay tuned for more programming and coverage here from the DMSCA conference. And if DMSCA is not on your radar, it should be. Check them out at DMSCA.us. And then secondly, be sure to check out what we've got coming up, both in person and from a digital event standpoint at supplychainnowradio.com. You can find most of those offerings, whether it's with the Automotive Industry Action Group, Modex, Resilience 360, EFT Reuters events, and much, much more on the events or the webinar tab at supplychainnowradio.com. Thanks again to our guests, including our sponsor, Paul Noble with Verison. For now, that concludes this episode. On behalf of the Scott Luton and the entire team here, we wish you a wonderful week ahead, and we'll see you next time on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.